I'm Farhan Dalla, transformational trainer, and welcome to Elevate Your Life, a transformational podcast, an invitation to take the journey towards your deepest self. It is my intention to inspire you to connect, move, and meditate. We'll tap in, tune in, and dive in, and together learn and reflect from authentic, real, and transformative conversations. Let's get started. Disclaimer: the information in this episode is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you have a medical condition, please consult with a medical practitioner. Hi, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to my guest today. Her name is Kalpana Gananathan. She is a Montessori teacher, parent, coach, and dynamic workshop leader who is passionate about helping families unlock what's really driving behavior, both in children and within themselves. After hitting a breakpoint in her own life, she experienced a powerful transformation inspired by the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza. What followed was a complete shift from struggle and self-sabotage to living with intention, clarity, and deep gratitude. Today, she runs Syntropic Impact and offers services to empower parents and educators to create more harmony at home and in the classroom. To add to her talents, she's also the author of a children's book titled The Enchanted World of Vegetables that makes healthy living simple and meaningful for kids. Hi, how are you?
Farhan, thank you so much for this opportunity. I deeply appreciate it. I'm so glad I jumped on when you asked, are there people who are willing to share their stories? And I have been sharing my stories for a long time. I'm open about my struggles, my journey, and where I am right now. And I'm deeply grateful for this opportunity.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. And I had a lot of responses, so I'm glad we were able to coordinate. And it's really interesting because I think in the past, people might have shied away from sharing some of their experiences and for whatever reason. But I think it's really important that we all do, just as I have, because you never know who it could inspire, touch, motivate, uplift, or also show them the possibility of what what is possible for them as well. And so I, after reading your bio, I just want to dive into this conversation and learn about your story. So I want to kind of start the conversation about what was life like pre-Dr. Joe? What was happening at that time?
So I led a very normal life, right? What you would call as a regular life, husband, wife, 2 children kind of life. And so I have 2 sons. My older son, the pregnancy was just a normal pregnancy. And, I just thought that's how life would be until my second pregnancy came along and it began getting complicated even before the first trimester ended. And bless their heart, I was in the care of midwives, and they were the most amazing thing that could have happened to me because the way they delivered their news about the pregnancy being complicated was just like filled with so much compassion, and it was just like not at all like a medical professional would deliver the information. So, on hindsight, I think that is what anybody needs, a lot of compassion when someone is going through some troubled times. In my case, the pregnancy was very complicated and they were at the point of recommending termination. And something inside my gut kept saying, Kalpana, fight this. Don't give in to what the medical fraternity is telling you. And this is all pre-Dr. Joe, right? And the funny thing is, when I have conversations with people, I now tell them that if someone came to me, I probably would advise termination because that's how complicated the results on paper looked, right?
Was it a question of your own life was at risk? Is that why?
No, it was that the alpha fetal protein levels were highly elevated, and which is basically that happens when there is a leak of protein from the baby's spine into the amniotic fluid.
Oh, okay.
And basically, what that means is that the baby will be born with spina bifida, which is like a deformation of the spine, right? And when you looked at it on paper, 7 times elevation of alpha fetal protein levels is very, very high. And s- I went through immense stress. And then, in addition to that, you have family and friends who are very loving, who would tell you it is the best for not only the family, but more so also the older son. Because if I had a very, very sick younger child, then the older child would have to go through some kind of neglect. So there was a lot of guilt. There was a lot of sadness. There was a lot of worry. There was a lot of, I can't even explain those feelings now, right? Because I don't associate with that person that I was then. But
Mhm.
I was that person. I lived in absolute hopelessness. I lived in so much fear. I lived in agony and guilt. My goodness, the guilt. And for whatever reason, we were able to go through a lot of testing, and the chances of this baby being born with a deformity dropped from 20% down to, like, I think 0.2%. And that was the point at which I was able to convince my husband that I want to pull through with the pregnancy. And it was literally me against the world.
How far are you into the pregnancy at this point?
So this is, I want to say, this is 2009. So 2008, these conversations were happening around October timeframe, between September and October timeframe.
Well, were you at, your second trimester at this point
Yeah,
when you received that?
yeah,
You're still in your first trimester. Okay, just to get a timeline of what's happening.
yeah.
Okay, so the odds are starting to get in your favor.
Yes. And I didn't know that, right? I didn't know that the odds were going to be in my favor because we're going through these testing after testing, and it's just daunting. And at that time, I was working a full-time job. And I want to say it was a very toxic environment where I was working. And now, having done Dr. Joe's work for however long I've done it, I know what stress can do to the body. So the termination can be recommended only in the first trimester, because the minute you go on to the second trimester, they will not do the termination, right? So we had like a 2-week window within which we had to make a decision. So it was
Wow.
a very stressful time. And even though the results came back fine, Farhan, it was a very, very tough pregnancy to go through, thinking that, what could happen. I wasn't as wise as I am today. I didn't know Dr. Joe back then. And so I had no tools to deal with what I was going through. It was one of the hardest times of my life. Now, I pulled through the pregnancy. The baby is born 8 pounds, 4 ounces, normal pregnancy. But because they were midwives, I could see their faces, and I could see that, they were having this conversation, and I couldn't understand what it was. So as I was delivering the baby, what has happened is that he has inhaled meconium. Meconium inhalation happens when, due to the stress of the labor, the baby poops inside the stomach and inhales it. Now, what happens is that amniotic fluid now has gone into the lungs of the baby. So they had to take him away immediately. I held him for a few minutes, and they took him away immediately because his breathing was labored. So they took him into the NICU, and he was there. And what happened after was that I got, like, I don't know, 10 hours of sleep, and I wake up and I go, oh, wait a second. Like, I had a baby. Where's the baby? Right? So when I went, I had to walk out of my room to go and check the baby, and I couldn't see him because he was all wired up. It was the most traumatic thing that I have gone through. Long story short, we were in the NICU for almost a week. His jaundice had to come down. It was not a pleasant experience because in Canada, when your baby is the patient, the mother who's well is not the patient, which means that the baby is under the care of the nurses, not the mother. And my husband was working in a very, very stressful job at that time. The hospital was far from my house. And so there was no support whatsoever. I was alone. And it took such a toll on me because the hospital wouldn't give me food. I would have to go downstairs to Tim Hortons, which opened only at 6 a.m. So, which means all through the night, I went hungry unless I planned food and I kept it with me. So I was eating garbage food, and I couldn't take the baby to go downstairs to Tim Hortons because he's a patient. You don't take the patient out of the NICU. Now, I can't leave him there because then child services will be called upon me. So do you see, like, there was just
Mm.
so added stress that was happening, and I didn't have support. Not because I lacked support at home, it's just that logistically, we couldn't make it work. So you can imagine the stress that I'm going through, and I'm passing it on to the baby every time I hold the baby. Long story short, anyways, came home within 30 days, I began to notice that he had this really bad rash all over his skin, and I couldn't understand what was causing it.
Mhm.
And he was born in March, and this is April, and you know how Canadian weather is in April, but they looked like heat boils, right? And then eventually I started to notice that he's actually oozing from those heat boils, and I couldn't understand what was causing it. Now, did not even think that I could be the reason for this child suffering, right? Because I was going through a lot of stress. Then I began noticing that he wasn't hitting his milestones in terms of growth and weight. And he was so underweight. He was breastfed exclusively, and he was so underweight. And I couldn't understand why. However, I was going through such deep depression that I would see that the vitamin D drops are within arm's reach, but I could not reach it, take it, and give it to him. That's the level of depression I was going through because I was so fuzzy in my brain. I was severely sleep deprived because this child would just cry and cry and cry. We were then sent to a dermatologist. And Farhan, I will never forget this experience in my entire life. I walk into the doctor's office. He takes a look at Akash and pulls out a prescription from his pocket and hands me a cortisol cream. And I was like, "You had a pre-written prescription? You didn't even take a look at my child. You didn't even consider other possibilities why this child has this condition." And it was a very, very powerful cream. And what it does is when you apply that cream, after a while, it makes your skin have dark patches, right? I walked out of there. I was so distraught that I actually dropped it into the garbage outside the doctor's office and I walked out. And I was like, there has to be a solution to this. Now, this is 2009. I wasn't as wise as I am today. So I didn't have the resources to look deep. So what I did was I started to talk to people, right? What would you do if there is that kind of eczema? And they started to tell me, oh, you can try oatmeal bath and, like oil massage. I tried a whole bunch of things. None of those
These are
things.
like your home remedies type thing from yeah, yeah.
I come from a family where we've always first resorted to home remedies, right? Before we got into anything where the doctor would say, here's an antibiotic, right? So it really did help in that sense. However, I was really fuzzy from lack of sleep. And so many of my decisions were not coming from a coherent place.
Mm.
And so now months roll on. He's still not doing well. He's not hitting his milestones. We go to India because this was also the time that my husband lost his job. So I don't have work. He doesn't have work. And so it took a toll on the family in all aspects. So I said to my husband, in order to save money, it's probably a good idea that we just go to India. Like, we'll be able to bring down all the expenses because we'll be able to stay with my parents. Anyways, I took the children, I went to India, and he did not get well in India either. And it was an extremely stressful time. I come back and I'm ready to now go back to work. At this time, he's now 18 months of age. So I go back to work and boy, oh boy, did I go back into the same stressful environment or what? Now, what happened was my stress levels were doubled because now I'm working. But remember, we always have these justifications in our head. We say, oh, we need to bring the money home. We have to pay the mortgage. We have to pay the bills. And those are normal conversations that happen in any household because no, at that point in time, I didn't have this energy conversation happening around me. Now, by this time, the workload that I was carrying home was so stressful that everything that I was doing at home would be driven by that stress. Oh, I need to get my laundry done really quickly because I have that stuff to do from work. I have to make sure that food is cooked really quickly. So, because I have that work, it was always driven by the stress and mundane everyday chores were hard to get by. Now you can imagine by this time, like it's already close to like 18 months, 2 years in, and my brain fog is slowly increasing.
Hmm. At this
Now,
point, did you realize that you needed help yourself, and did you seek it from the medical community, or all your priorities towards,
all the
your unwell child, getting the bills paid? Like, and many families can relate to this, I'm
yes,
sure, as new moms.
yes.
Yeah. Wow.
And
Okay.
and so at this point, like around the 2.5 year mark, I have thought it through how I wanted to end my life because I wanted the suffering to end because the pain was too much to see him suffer. And he was a late talker, he was a late walker. And I still remember I went and saw a developmental pediatrician, and bless this man, he was such a game changer for me. When I took him there, I said to him, I said, he's not hitting his milestones. He's not talking yet. I'm really concerned. And this man said something that I will never forget until my dying day. He said, I guarantee you, your son will walk, your son will talk. And you know the medical fraternity in Canada, Farhan, that's typically not something that fraternity would say with certainty. And
Hmm.
he was right. And now when I think back, I feel like those were those glimmers of hope that I had from what I'd like to call as angels. Somebody just telling you something other than what your brain is believing.
I feel like that was more powerful than hope. Like, hope makes you think that it could potentially happen, but I felt like this was reassurance, and that was like the life thread that, or lifeline, that you needed to hold on to. It gave you, it was the crack in the pavement that started some light in through this whole journey, wouldn't you say?
Indeed. Right? Now, when I was in India, like it's all like, you think back at life, right? When I was in India, I was talking to anybody and everybody. Actually, I was doing that even in Canada, right? I would just tell anybody and everybody my story with the hope that somebody would give me that one solution to the problem, right? And at this point in time, Akash and myself are going through probably like 2, 3 hours of sleep every night. Showing up at work, like he can imagine the levels of exhaustion we're all feeling, right? Severe brain fog, exhaustion, sadness, guilt, name it. I was going through all of these things. But when I was in India, what I realized is that I would have these conversations with auto drivers, taxi drivers, bus conductors, and they would all tell me those little things that would give me hope. And it was just something silly as, oh, you know what? My nephew had it, and what we had was one of those hanging bars. Like, let him hang. What happens is it stretches the muscle, and that should help with the pain because Akash also had a lot of leg cramps. And it was like unexplained leg cramps. It was like, is it food sensitivities? I don't know what is going on because he could, if he ate chicken, he would get pain. And then when I went to my doctor would say, how are the chicken leg pains? Right? Like, it was just like there was nothing that we could figure out what was causing these pains. And I was giving him Tylenol 6 nights a week. This is like me first starting with massaging his feet. Then I would put him in the bath. Like this is like happening at 12:31 at night. Farhan, as I'm telling you the story, it feels like I'm narrating some movie to you. It doesn't even feel like it
Mm,
is my life.
yeah. And
That's
you still have two kids at this point, right? Like, how old is your eldest at this
so
point?
3.5. So
Three
between
and a
them,
half.
3.5 years
So he
apart.
still needs you too, like for a lot of things, right? So I can imagine the demands.
Yes, yes. And then what happened was in 2013, I decided to start a Montessori school on my by myself. And when I say I started it, I bought an existing business, right? But it was still mine. So you can imagine now, brain fog, sleeplessness, and starting a business, right? What was I thinking? And this continues. But somewhere in between, I have this because where I am from, I go, wait a second, this is all related to past life. I'm going to go and dig into past life because my karma is bad and da da da. You just chase new narratives. That's what you do, right? So I went to a Hay House conference in 2014, and there were a lineup of beautiful speakers. But I went looking for past life solutions, and it was an amazing experience. And then on day two is on this pamphlet is this name Dr. Joe Dispenza. I'm like, oh, whatever. Okay, I've never heard this name before. And here he comes onto stage and he goes, I want you to turn to the person next to you and introduce yourself as a genius. I'm like, okay, like seriously. I roll my eyes, right? Turn and say, hi, my name is Kalpana. I'm a genius, right? On both sides. By the time his keynote speech ended, my entire thought process in my brain had changed. I was
Yeah,
just
I
like,
think I was there. Was this at Roy Thompson Hall?
yes, oh my
Yeah,
God,
I was there.
yes,
Yeah, I was definitely there, and I didn't mean to interrupt your story, but this was sounding very familiar to me.
yes,
Um, I don't know if you know Cheryl Richardson was one of the speakers that day,
yes,
and her and I had been keeping in touch,
no way.
and I've been sharing some of my stories that I'd written with her, and she introduced me to everyone in the audience and asked me to stand up, and I was like blown away. But yeah, I was definitely there. I heard who's that lady that had the near death experience as well?
Yes,
Anita Morgiani.
yeah, yeah, Anita
Yeah,
Murja.
I was in that audience. That's crazy.
Oh,
Yeah, I definitely heard Dr. Joe speak. I definitely remember this. So go on. So what happened after
so
you heard him speak?
I hear him speak, and I'm just like, wait a second. Wait, what? Is it a possibility that I have been the problem this entire time and it's not my worry for my child? It was like this light bulb went off. And right then, at the end of that keynote, he had said that he's doing his progressive workshop in May in Toronto. That's it. I came home. The first thing I was on his website, and I went to his progressive workshop in May of the same year because this was in March, and in May he was here. At the end of the progressive workshop, he announced Carefree Arizona, which is their advanced retreat. And back in the days, it was like, I think 3.5 days. And I had decided that I'm going to Carefree. So my journey started off like that. Now you need to remember, right? It's not an overnight transformation I went through, right? And it's just as, those 2.5 days of doing the progressive workshop. And at that time, it's maybe 200, 300 people. That's it. In Toronto, I'm talking about. And I'm just like, yeah, this stuff is like so nice. Oh, that's so cute. I know it happens to other people. Maybe, whatever. At this time, no change happening, right? Because
Had you read any of his books at this point, or you just went to
I did buy the books, right?
okay. And were
Now,
you meditating at this point, or were you no? So you just read his books and you attended the progressive. Okay.
right? Now, just remember, right? It's not like I wouldn't meditate. Like it would get really, really bad. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to go into a meditation, right? And then I would come back feeling really nice and woozy. And I'm like, oh, this feels good. And then drop it again. Why? Because, oh, I've got work to do. I've got, I've got to clean the house and I've got to cook for the kids and I've got to do groceries. Like, right? I wasn't. Then I go to Carefree. Now, I go to Carefree, Arizona, and back in the days, Dr. Joe used to do dimensionalizing object meditations. So, what it would be is that he would lead you into a meditation where you think of an object, whatever it is, if you can think of it, right? You dimensionalize it. Basically, you give it depth, you give it perception, you give it smell, you give it texture, blah, blah. And he goes, and basically leading you into the belief that this can happen for you. The thing ends, and you can imagine Carefree, Arizona's a desert, right? So the meditation ends, we have to break, we all go away, And when I come back, on the floor is a key, right? So I pick it up and I go to everyone around my table. I go, is this your key? Is this your key? And they also, no, it's not my key. So I turn to the table behind. I tap the guy and I go, hi, is this your key? And he looks at it and he looks like he's seen a ghost because his object was the key. And at this point in time, I'm thinking to myself, like, wait, what? And that key did not belong to anybody. So he took it home with him. Now, as the day rolls on, no, before I left on the break, right? When I came back from the break, I look to my left and I see this one gentleman who's standing far away. And I see this hummingbird that comes and just this little dance in front of him and goes away. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, so beautiful. Like I'm all into these little things. Oh my gosh, squirrel. Oh my gosh, hummingbird, dragonfly, blah, blah. And I go, that's so beautiful. Next thing I know, this man is on stage. He had dimensionalized a hummingbird. And at this point, I'm going, what on earth is happening? What on earth is happening? And then there's this one woman. She comes on stage. Her thing was a $2 bill, a US bill, right? She's on stage. At this point, my wacko brain is like, oh, it happens to other people, not to me. Because in my case, what I did was I was so cocky that I was trying to challenge Dr. Joe's work in my head, not in front of everyone, right? So I said, people are dimensionalizing objects that they wish to see. In my case, I don't like flowers. And I'm going to dimensionalize a yellow rose. I'm not into flowers at all. I don't enjoy getting them as gifts. I don't enjoy plucking them off the plant. I feel like the flower belongs to the plant, right? So this is me. Now, I had gone to Dr. Joe with a friend, and I just said, well, the hotel is unused, so you're welcome to use the hotel. So she came with me, and she was touring Arizona, right? Like during the day, she would just go off to walk around this city. So I told her that I had dimensionalized an object and it hadn't become my reality yet. Anyway, the event ends. It's a beautiful event. Still lots of like, oh my gosh, oh, it was so beautiful. Hugs, the typical Dr. Joe event. And we decide we are in the lineup at Walmart as we're checking out. And we ask for a recommendation for a good Mexican restaurant. So, of course, someone makes a really nice local restaurant recommendation. We're sitting down to eat, and we're having this conversation. And she looks at me like a ghost has struck her. And she goes, oh my God, you're not going to believe this. And here's a woman that walks into the restaurant with a basket full of yellow roses. And she goes, I'm going to buy this for you. And I lost my mind here. Even when I think of this moment.
So you didn't get one rose, but there was a basket that comes in for you.
And yellow. And yellow, right?
Yeah.
Basket yellow roses.
Which is really rare. Like I can't even think of a time where I've seen people sell like red roses or maybe, I don't know, carnations, but never a yellow rose. That's very specific.
Yeah. So I came away from that. I was just like, what happened? And that's when I realized it has really nothing to do with a meditation, dimensionalization, none of those things. It all goes back to how worthy you feel of receiving.
Say that again, please. I think that's such an important point, right? And I think that's a common theme with all my guests, including my story of transformation, is that is such a key point, is your worthiness to receive. So please say it again.
Until you feel worthy enough to receive, you will not receive. And I can't reiterate this. So my friends know I'm a huge Big Bang Theory fan, right? Like
The show Big Bang Theory?
The show The Big Bang Theory, right? And I can probably recite every dialogue, right? And I can relive the scenes. I find it extremely funny. And it's my absolute favorite comedy. And the character that I relate most to is Penny, right? And there's one episode where she's being asked how she walks around with no money in her pocket. And the statement that she makes is, I'm cute, I get by. And for me, that signals worthiness. And I now use it as a phrase a lot, right? But I don't use it in a cocky way to talk to people, but to the universe. I say, I'm cute, I get by. And in essence, what I'm signaling is I'm worthy. I'm worthy of receiving. And it's only in the worthiness of receiving can we give. Because when you give from a place of receiving, you give in wholeness. You give with abundance because you in your mind know for a fact, Farhan, that absolutely that pot will keep filling over and over and over again to give more.
Hmm. So as you start to apply the work, how did you change? And the second part of this question is, how did your life change as a result of it? Bit of a
So,
loaded question, but let's break it down. How did you change? And then we'll go into how did your life change?
so let me tell you this, right? I used to, I have a quirky sense of humor, and I used to live with a lot of sarcasm, right? And it was just a coping mechanism I was using, right? Nah, sure. Yeah. Right. And then I started to notice, no, that's not a conversation I'm going to have like that again. Right. Don't get me wrong. Sarcasm is amazing. But I started to notice the language that I was using. Right. Uh, I stopped using words like, oh, my luck, I missed the bus. Mm-mm, mm-mm. I'd stop saying it. It's like, no, 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 not at all. Not at all. And it was not overnight again. It was over a period in time I would catch myself like, don't say that. You're not going to say that again. And then I started to notice I'm getting surrounded by these people that are so amazing. For example, when you run a business, especially Montessori school, you have a parent body, right? And typically schools would say, oh my gosh, oh, these parents are too much. And I would say, oh my gosh, I love my parent body. They're amazing parents. And then what would happen is the drop off conversations were beautiful. They were supportive.
This is
And
when the parents are dropping the kids off.
right. And it's like,
Mhm.
what is it? It's a 30-second conversation, right? It's a 50
Right.
minute, 15-second conversation. And yet there was something that was beautiful that was coming out of it. And I'm like, oh, this makes me feel really good. This makes me feel really good. Now, the other thing that began happening was when my awareness started to spin, I was just like, oh, maybe I can look at what is happening right now in a different light. I'll give you an example of something that happened. This parent comes and she drops off her child. And I had a very small driveway that could fit only 4 cars at school, right? So I would park on the street. And once all the parent drop offs are done, then I would bring my car in. I'd leave that space empty for the parents to first drop off. So she comes and she drops off, completely not paying attention because, she's in a rush or whatever. She backs on and goes straight into my car, right? And at this point in time, you're talking about this whole thing that the front bumper is looking like this, wide open. And
Wow.
she parks again. She comes inside and she says, I'm so sorry. I messed up, right?
Mm.
What happened? And she goes, I hit your car. And I look out and I can see this thing is like peeking out to the point where it's probably going to hit another car that's going to drive by. That's how badly she's hit it because she's really reversed really quickly. And I looked at her and I said, ah, don't worry about it. It's just a car. Because in that moment, what I was thinking was, I had had a horrible night with Akash the previous night. And I was so exhausted. But my response to something like that, I caught myself when I walked away from the parent. I was like, wait a second. That's really a very interesting response to have to something that is that big. And needless to say, she paid for the repairs, whatever. But the card that she wrote for me, she actually mentioned it. She said, thank you for being so gracious in the way you dealt with it.
Hmm.
So what happened was I started to feel more gracious within. And those are subtle changes for him.
Hmm.
And
But look at the way it shows up, right?
it shows up big time.
Right? Yeah.
Big time, right? And it honestly just keeps going back to awareness. How aware are we? And now I use this term bait, right? So for me, when things don't go my way, I go, that's a bait for a lower frequency. Am I going to fall for that bait? And I go, no. There are times I walked on the red carpet of bait. I was like, oh yeah, did I let it happen or what? But I catch myself now and I spin that story for myself.
That's amazing. I mean, I'm assuming at this point you're still having brain fog, right? Because sleep is still an
Definitely.
issue. So to be able to be aware like that, you went from the vitamin D is in front of me, and I don't even have the functional capacity to think of the steps that I need to take in order to get the drops and give it to my child. And now you're aware of all self-sabotaging thoughts, even, and negative belief systems, and you're correcting them on the spot in your mind, and you're having a different experience on the spot. Like, that's a huge transformation in itself.
Huge transformation. I realized, Farhan, that when you show up from an energy of change, you show up differently to other people. People start to see you differently. I'll give you a very small example. My parents were in India and they've just come back and they brought back a whole bunch of these old pictures, right? There's like, okay, let's relive memories kind of thing. And back in the days, we printed everything, nothing was digital.
Yeah.
There's one framed picture of mine that my mom has brought, and I'm looking at it. It was taken on March 31st, 2002. I was at a wedding, right? Farhan, I looked older then than I look now. And the only reason for that is all the stress that I was going through. I looked defeated. I'm looking at this picture going, is this actually me? That's 2002. That's 24 years prior. That's the change that comes about when you start living differently. Literally every challenge becomes a possibility. And I play these games constantly. I play silly games with myself all the time, Farhan. And when I write my intentions, I write my intentions every single day, right? It's never like, oh my gosh, I want to land a speaking gig. It's never like that. I write saying, I'm heard, I'm seen, I'm loved, I'm empowered. And that's my intention. And then what I do is every day when I write it, I reflect back on the previous day to see if any of those things have come true. And on a daily basis, I see I have micro moments of those intentions coming true.
That's amazing. And how did your son's health evolve through your journey?
So now what happened was I want to say he must have been like 6, 7, something like that. By this time, I've already started Dr. Joe's work, right? We were at a family function, and I can see my husband at a distance having a conversation with a distant relative of ours who's a doctor. And she is now super concerned. She's like, oh, you know what? You need to take him to sick kids and you need to get all these tests done and da da da. So my husband on the drive back home goes, Kalpana, we need to go to sick kids. And all I
Sick
could,
Kids is a hospital in Toronto for those people who don't know.
correct. And all I could think of in my head is, hey, this is his journey too. So I'm going to let him allow his journey to come through. And I said to him, I completely understand what you feel. Please feel free to go to sick kids with him, but I won't be doing it because I know he's going to be fine. Now, just remember at this point in time, the 2, 3 hour nights are now probably 4, 5 hour nights. And the Tylenol that was like 6 nights a week is probably now like 2, 3 times a week. So there are changes happening, but they're like subtle changes. But I'm cluing on that these subtle changes are happening. Why? Because when you have not slept for years and you suddenly get this window of sleep of like 2 hours to 4 hours, you're suddenly a brand new human being. You're a brand new human being. And but it's a very confusing feeling, Farhan, right? As restful as it seems, you wake up the next morning, you go, that was weird. Because your body doesn't know that you feel more rested and that the brain fog is actually lifting. And it's just the most fascinating thing. And it's most of the stuff that I'm saying now, I only realized in hindsight, right? I didn't realize it when I was going through it, which is like, oh, I got 4 hours. Yeah. That's what I would say. But even that celebration of that yay was, I think, an investment into the future. Because we all have these long-term goals, right? And we are only seeing the goal. Now, in Montessori, we are not product-centric. We are process-centric. And that's the other realization that I began to have when I would
Can you explain that? Sorry.
suddenly.
Just briefly, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so it's not about getting a child to read and write, but truly investing in the process that the child will read and write. So Montessori says the more you invest in the present moment with the child, the more the child becomes the person that the child should be. And I'm thinking, how different is that from Dr. Joe's work? That's
It's very similar. Yeah.
So I have had these bling moments when I have sat at Dr. Joe's events. I'm like, that's Dr. Montessori. That's Dr. Montessori. And then I began to feel gratitude for a profession that I was in where I could link the work. Can you imagine? Like working in a setting where you can actually practice Dr. Joe's work without disrupting anything. So what I would become conscious of when I showed up in the classroom was who I was, not who the child was. Right? So if a child showed up like, "Wah," I would ask myself, wait a second, what am I feeling? And that changed my classroom dramatically. So the most common thing that I was told is that my classroom was always very peaceful. How do you have 20 odd kids in your classroom that's so peaceful? Well, it was happening not because of the kids, it's because of who I was. I showed up peaceful in the classroom. And every time I had a disrupted classroom, I asked myself, what is happening within? So can you imagine a journey of where you learn something and you realize that your actual job fits exactly like that, like as a puzzle? So the way I showed up for parents was different. I showed up with a lot of compassion. Why? Because I had compassion for myself. I had a lot of empathy. Why? Because I had a lot of empathy for myself. So that's what the shift is. The shift is that you become very, very aware and you stop placing the blame on the outside and start to look within.
Taking responsibility for your needs and giving it to yourself and not looking outside of yourself or to someone else to give it to you, right?
Yeah. And now
Mhm.
even something untoward happens, my first question to myself is not why did it happen to me, but in the past, where did I fall from grace? It's because I was not a conscious creator. If you're not a conscious creator, then untoward things will happen in the unconscious world.
You live life by default.
Yeah. And I choose not to live life by default. Now,
Mhm.
most people have asked me this, right? Do you have like a plan for the day? Not really. But what I do, where I do have the planning is to live very intentionally. Like I was looking forward to this conversation. So I lived intentionally as to what this conversation would look like in my head. I rehearsed it. And that is the premise of Dr. Joe's work, right?
Mhm.
In Dr. Montessori's words, she would say, repetition is key. So how different is it from Dr. Joe? So I
Yeah.
repeat. And when we started this conversation, I told you, Farhan, right? You asked me if I had an intention for this conversation. And I told you, the intention is that I wish to feel empowered through empowering others. And so this conversation, we started this conversation back in March. Is that right? When we started to write to each other? It was in
That's
March,
correct. Yeah. Yeah, it was in
right?
March.
And from March, I have rehearsed how empowered it would make me feel to have this conversation with you. And it's not like an everyday meditative thing, right? It's just glimpses I would catch myself and I'd be like, oh my gosh, when I talk to Farhan, it's going to feel so good.
Mhm.
And honestly, I was prepared for this. So now what has happened is, imagine I have lived it from middle of March to now, right? We're in the middle of April. So I have lived that experience multiple times and I'm living it today. So the
Mm.
whole impact on me is multifold. It's not an event that was in the future for me. It was an event that I was living in the present,
As though it already happened.
like it had already happened, right?
Hmm. That's amazing. And how is your son's health today?
Great question. He is shining.
Mm.
He still gets those leg cramps, but they're not as severe. And imagine a child who was always under the 5th percentile for height and weight. And this child is now a little bit taller than me. Again, is he behind in comparison to his peers? Yes. But is this child rock solid as a human being? Heck yeah.
Mm.
You know, he's 17 now, Farhan. It honestly feels like a dream. That first half of his life feels like a dream. I cannot believe it is the same child. I can't believe I am the same mother.
Well, that was going to be my next question is how have you changed as a mother through this experience?
I have been more forgiving of myself. I have let go of a lot of negativity from myself. And by that, what I mean is I lived in a lot of sadness and guilt. And I'm sorry to say, when I look back, I lived entitled. Like, I'm a very good human being. I have to have this. No, no, it doesn't happen. You are not entitled to that. What you are, what you need to be is responsible, not entitled.
Hmm.
The more awareness I brought to myself, Farhan, I realized that I began to take responsibility. Now, I always say this, right? There's a fine line between feeling responsible and feeling guilty. They're actually two sides of the same coin. Because a lot of us, we do this. It's like, oh, that's because of me. Oh, of course, it's because of me. No, that's because of me. It happened because of me. I don't do that. I take responsibility and I realize that words are not powerful. It's the energy behind the words that's powerful.
Hmm.
It's the energy behind the words. And when I say this, when I say I feel responsible, I say it from a place of feeling very empowered. I'm responsible for what happened during my pregnancy, post pregnancy, and for all of those thoughts is very different from how could I have had that conversation with myself as a mother? How could I have thought of abandoning Avinash? Those are guilty conversations. A responsible conversation is I was that person. I choose not to be that person anymore.
I think the difference is between blame and ownership, right?
100%. Yes.
Mm.
100%.
So
100%.
seeing how your youngest son evolved and how his health changed, how did your change impact your eldest son? In what way did your relationship with him change? And how has the way you changed been reflected in your relationship with him?
So my oldest son is now 20 years old, right? And obviously, you know, I showed up with a lot of demands of compassion from him for his brother and for me. Like, and it's not something that I could have asked of a young child back then. For whatever reason, there are times I do think, you know, did he grow up too quickly? Right? Did he grow up? Did he not have a proper childhood? And the beauty is that I have a beautiful relationship with him and I can have deep conversations with him. And I've asked him these questions, right? Do you feel like, you know, we haven't done enough for you because Akash was so sick? And he goes, no, it's actually quite the opposite. You know, I was always a part of all of those conversations. And it's not like he doesn't feel it, but it has not impacted him negatively because I see the way he's showing up as a human being in life now. And he's literally the person that I would have hoped for when he was younger. He's very compassionate. He's very kind. He's all about relationships. And he truly is leading a life in a manner that a proud mom would expect him to lead a life. So again, I go back to my journey. I am immensely grateful for the pain that I went through. And it sounds so bizarre when you say something like that, but I'm immensely grateful because it truly has shaped our family. We went from a family that was falling apart to a family that is thriving. The conversations that I have been having with my 20-year-old. So this is the first time ever that he has lived alone by himself in our home for an extended period of time because he's in a co-op program. He's an accounting student and he's in a co-op program. He's living alone at home. Farhan, when I walked in through the doors the day I landed in Toronto, my jaw dropped. The house was spotless. He's been cooking his food every day. He's been packing his own lunches and he's been going to the gym and showing up at work on time. And I think to myself, if I had quote unquote failed as a mom, today he wouldn't be thriving. My biggest fear, if I may say, when I was moving to Saudi, and I was really putting the brakes on it, right? I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go. I don't want to go kind of thing. And when I was putting the brakes on it, my fear was that he would be living alone here and the weather would have an impact on his mood. He thrived this winter. This
Which
was,
was one of the worst winters on record.
yes, he
Yeah.
thrived. I
Yeah.
was expecting him to call and say, "Bah, I'm really depressed," whatever, right?
Yeah.
No, he did really well. And in essence, what it was putting that faith that it's all going to work out. But I have to say, Farhan, last year, this time, I was, I would, it's a comparative statement. I was in a relatively dark space in terms of this move. But boy, has it been good for me. The
Mhm.
universe was telling me, the divine was talking to me and saying, woman, you're going to go there and you're going to live that life that you've always dreamt of. And that is exactly what Saudi Arabia is for me. It has been a game changer in terms of where I am in my headspace.
Hmm.
And
That's amazing.
And I came back when I landed here and I went into school because I still am a part of that school. It's still my baby, right? I went into school and as I walked in, I saw the space and I said, my gosh, this space is so beautiful and I created it, but I am grateful for the journey, but it has ended. I had no regrets. I never thought I would be this human being. I thought like I have all of like every material has a piece of me in it. I bought this at that thrift store and then I'm color coordinated on this time of the year. I have all the stories related to it, but I had
Mhm.
absolutely zero regrets. That for me was a mind blowing experience because I expected me to have emotional attachments that I can't detach from. But that's the beauty of this work, Farhan. When you live a very intentional life, the beauty of it is that you will live with lesser regrets, lesser regrets. And those energetic bonds that don't serve your wellness will start to dissipate, begin dissipating.
Mm. But you have to do the work.
Okay, there
You
is no
have to do the work. Yes.
there
There
is
is no shortcuts.
zero shortcuts,
Yeah.
zero, right? And by that, so oftentimes people have asked me this, right? Oh my gosh, what did you
How
do to
long did it take?
what meditation do you do to heal
Yeah.
yourself, right? Or how long do you meditate? Do you
Mhm.
get up at 4 a.m. to meditate, right?
Mhm.
Let me tell you this. Those are blueprints to success. That is how you commit to the work. But as Dr. Joe would say, it's really no point. You get up from an amazing meditation and then you go about your entire day fretting and cussing.
Right. If you go back to your old self and
Cannot go back to your old self. You cannot absolutely go back to your old self. And you can catch yourself when you go back to your old self. And you can tell yourself, that's the old me. That fretting me was the old me. That sad me was the old me. No. Those are the energetic bonds that you can absolutely disconnect from. And that
create a whole new life.
it's a whole new life. It's a
Right.
whole new life. So one of the things that I would always say, Farhan, is that I want to be able to have conversations that are uninterrupted. And I want to be in command of those conversations, right? And I'm going to explain to you what it is. Like, what would happen is parents would drive in, and one parent would say, oh, I'm really struggling because, I can't seem to be sleeping. Okay. That parent drives away. The second parent comes up and she goes, oh my gosh, we have a leak in the basement. Right. Third parent shows up and she's just like, oh my gosh, my child was an absolute shit in the morning. Right. And then this is like consistently, there's nothing wrong in what was being shared. But my headspace would have to go from one topic to another so quickly. And I would think to myself, what would it mean to have long conversations uninterrupted? And that's something so empowering. Farhan, what is happening right now? This is an uninterrupted conversation we're having.
Mm-hmm.
And this has become my daily life now. I have these uninterrupted, beautiful conversations. And it feels like I dropped it to one person and picked it up right back with another person. That's a conscious creator. You have to be so clear about what you want. Because what I was intentionally going after was a feeling. And I wanted to feel empowered on a daily basis. And that's what my life has turned around to be. And this credit goes to Dr. Joe because he brought awareness. But let me tell you this, Farhan, I will not give the 100% credit to Dr. Joe because 50% was Dr. Joe, 50% was me. Because this man came as that catalyst for change. He triggered it in me, but I had to put in the damn work. And there's no shortcut to putting in the work. None whatsoever.
No. And when you show up for yourself and you do the work, you will get the results.
100%. 100%.
I want to ask you this. What is one thing you've learned that you'd like to pass on to your own children?
The ability to trust. And that is a conversation I literally had 2 days ago with my older son. I said he was fretting about his next co-op. This current co-op is coming to an end, and he's fretting about his next co-op. Right? He goes, I need to find a good co-op for next term. And I said, it was a beautiful conversation, and I became very cognizant of in the energy with which I was saying it to him. I said to him, Avinash, I want you to reflect back on 20 years of your life. Life has worked out for you. Life will work out for you if you believe in that process. And when I finished saying it and I let it go and I let him ruminate on that thought for a few minutes, I said to myself, Kalpana, that was an amazing conversation to have with your 20-year-old because in essence, you're telling him of your own journey of this many years, of your own learning of this many years.
Which he's witnessed.
Which he has witnessed. Right?
Yeah.
But truly teaching someone to trust that the path has been carved out for you. Trust the process. I go back to Dr. Montessori. That's what Dr. Montessori would say, right? And the phrase now I use, Farhan, is if you sow green beans, you're not going to get sunflowers. You're going to get the green beans. So trust the process. Trust the process. Our life is like a garden. We sow the seeds, and if we give it the right conditions, that plant, that shrub, that tree is going to fulfill its potential. Trust the process.
Kalpana, what is a syntropic impact?
Oh,
and how did you come up with that name?
So when I went to Dr. Joe in 2019, the theme was syntropy. I had never heard the word syntropy before. And syntropy is the opposite of the word entropy. Entropy is chaos and disorder. Syntropy is organized information. And when information is organized, it will have an impact, hence syntropic impact. So Dr. Joe is the catalyst behind my company's name.
Okay. And what is your mission and what are the services that you provide?
So I am a parent coach. I've been one for several years. This is even prior to being with Dr. Joe, right? I've been a parent coach. That's because of my Montessori background. And now I offer little workshops in schools for educators and for families that are struggling with whatever. It could be bedtime routines to eating habits to whatever, right? Tantrums. anything. I offer small sized workshops. I really like small sized workshops because then I can engage with people one on one. And aside from that, I also do intention coaching, which is basically how to bring an intention to fruition. So I'm an intention coach as well. So again, hosting these small workshops. I have a workshop coming up shortly. Um, I did a workshop 2 days ago at a Montessori school, and Farhan, I got paid the best compliment ever. And I had the ability to tell the person that that is the best compliment ever, which was she cried. This parent cried. She was like, she knew I hit home. She knew that I hit home. And she was so open about it. And it was one of the most fulfilling feelings. And this is the other thing, when we started, I said, I want to lead a life of empowerment through empowering others. And in having that conversation with someone who cried, right? She came up to me at the end of the workshop. She said to me, it was really good. And she's still crying. I said to her, before you go forward, can I just say to you, the best compliment anybody has paid me is through tears. And you did it. And I'm really grateful for it. And when I came away, I was thinking to myself, crying is a very vulnerable thing for a person to go through. And instead of saying something like, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it, right? I understand. When you say something like, that's the best compliment you could have paid me, in that moment, what I did was I empowered her vulnerability. And I realized even that micro moment was a moment of empowerment for her and for me. And that is how I truly want to live life.
Hmm. What is the biggest thing today's parents need help with, and how is it that as a parent coach you're able to help?
I will say this until the cows come home. You want your child to be happy? You be happy. You
Mm,
want your child to feel settled? You be settled. You want your child to focus? You focus. Want your child to eat healthy food? You eat healthy food because your child is the mirror of who you are, not
mhm.
what you say. Not what you say. The child becomes a mirror of who you are.
That's really powerful, and I couldn't agree more. Um, you mentioned that you're living in Saudi Arabia right now, so this is a recent move
Yes.
and happens to be in the middle of some, geopolitical conflicts. How has Dr. Joe's teachings helped you to cope with what's happening in our world, and especially because of where you are geographically?
So, Farhan, when you start to shift your perspective, right, you start to realize that actually life is working for you. So the complex that I live in, there's this one spot where I started to feel tremendous amount of energy. And I was just like, why am I feeling this energy over here? And then I looked around and I realized that two lines intersect over there, right? And it's just this one particular spot where I could feel intense energy. So what I began doing, again, living consciously, is that I would go and sit in that spot on a consistent basis so I could feel very good energy. And I would do these mini meditations where I'd close my eyes, sit in that spot, take that energy in from the earth, move it into my spine, move it onto the top of my head. And I began to do this more consistently. Now, remember, back in September when I moved, there was no conflict in the horizon, right?
Mhm.
And it's when the conflict began, one of the things I started to notice was that, wait a second, I'm in the region, but I'm not impacted by it emotionally. Emotionally, it was not impacting me. And I started to question myself, like, am I going crazy? Like, am I just delirious that I'm not connecting with the information that has been told to me? And I realized, no, that's not true. Because if I don't show up for myself in that moment, then all this work that I've done with Dr. Joe goes out the window, out the window. So what happens is that the more settled I feel, the better I show up for my extended family that is outside of the region. And then I see my parents telling others and my sister talking to other people going, oh no, she seems to be doing fine. Things are good. Things are good. And people know I'm not an influencer. Like, I'm not saying this because I want to promote Saudi Arabia. It's not like that. It's indeed exactly what I was feeling that I was talking about. And I can tell you this. I have such immense gratitude for Dr. Joe's work, Farhan. I say this as I'm tearing up because it has made me give up my negative associations with fear, anxiety, and at every step of the way, I just feel like life is just working out for me. I can't say this in, I'm so emotional saying this. I can't say this with enough words to say Dr. Joe has been a game changer for me because he helped me come home to myself. And I say this, so when I was flying from Frankfurt to Toronto, I had this bling moment, right? I was born in India. I spent a good part of my life in Canada, and then I moved to Saudi Arabia. I have a birthland, I have a motherland, and I have a homeland. And if I can explain that, I was born in India. It gave me all the roots that I needed. Canada became my motherland because it mothered me into being a human being that I am today. Canada gave me beautiful relationships. Canada gave me the confidence to be an entrepreneur. I never thought I could get into business. Canada gave me my family. Canada gave my parents a home. And then I moved to Saudi Arabia and I call it homeland. Not like I'm going back home, but I went back to myself. And Saudi Arabia became homeland for me in that sense. I found immense peace in that land. And I can't say, I can't believe I'm using these words because I'm the same person last year, this time, who did not want to move.
Hmm.
But the divine intervened and the move happened. And I've seen such a different side to my husband since the move. And in essence, what it is literally trusting the process. So that's what I teach now. I teach to trust the process.
Again, reflecting back to your son, the advice that you gave him, what message do you wish to share to others who may be struggling with dealing the world's challenges at this time?
The only way that this world becomes a better place to live in is if you invest in yourself. Invest your time in yourself. Everything else is noise. The noise is your bait to take you into those states of stress, into those states of high beta. Resist that urge to fall for those stressors. Resist that urge. And the more you resist that urge, you realize you are actually flexing your brain muscle to become more adaptable to change, more adaptable to trust, more adaptable to faith. And what it is basically Dr. Joe's work has taught me what it means to trust, what it means to have faith. And I'm not talking about a religion, Farhan. I'm not. That's the beauty of the work.
And you are a leading, shining example of what is possible. When you look back and think of your journey and the best is yet to come, I'm sure that was a beautiful way to end this conversation. But if I could add just some final thoughts, there were so many teaching points to this.
Mhm.
The idea of worthiness, the idea of trust, and more so also the belief in yourself. You could not have done this without believing in yourself.
Yes.
And you demonstrated that with your commitment to doing the work, your commitment to being a better mother, entrepreneur, and now a coach. And I want to wish you continued success. My prayer for you is continued joy, continued happiness, continued safety, and continued inspiration for you to be shown ways to be of service through all that you've learned, through all that you are, through all your skills, through your words, through your writings, through your workshops and your teachings. There are so many ways that you already are impacting the world. And may the doors of life continue to open for you today and every day. May you continue to flourish in your relationship with yourself. the divine and with your family, your loved ones, and every person that you cross path with, because I know I'm different today because of you. So I thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. This was an immensely empowering opportunity for me, and I'm grateful to be sharing this space with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please stay in touch. Come back again, okay?
I will. Yeah.
I'm Farhan Dalla. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's episode of Elevate Your Life, a transformational podcast. I hope today's conversation has elevated you in some way and inspired you to connect, move, and meditate. I'd really appreciate your support by following and rating this podcast. Come back soon and join me for another transformative conversation.